To start off with, what is accessibility? According to MDN, accessibility is the practice of making your websites usable by as many people as possible. We traditionally think of this as being about people with disabilities, but the practice of making sites accessible also benefits other groups, such as those using mobile devices or those with slow network connections. Okay, I've got a slide about the speakers, but I think it will be good if the speakers can introduce themselves. Shall we start from Dorlyn?
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Dorlyn Catron. I work as a 508 compliance analyst. So I basically do web accessibility and document accessibility. I am currently in Maryland, along with my guide dog Tank, who you might have seen on the flyer with me. If I could visit somewhere, I think it would be Japan. I know someone else brought that up. I've heard they've got cool tactile markings for cane users on the ground to get different places and micro braille. I'm a big Braille fan as well, and I've been in this accessibility space for about 4 years, but only professionally a little over a year.
Oh, cool. Thank you for the introduction. Shall we go to Abby next? Or
Yeah,
Evie,
hi.
so
Hi everyone. My name is Evie Baden. I am based in Indianapolis, Indiana. I am a front end leaning full stack developer, but as of lately, I've been more into the UX side of things. It's a pretty new field. I'm considered a UX engineer, which is like the front of the front end side of building apps and website and software. I'm enjoying this new role that I'm in just because I get to collaborate with designers and set some accessibility standards so that we're able to you know we're able to send off um, accessible designs for actual engineers and software engineers to abide by. Because normally, when they build things, they tend to go on their own little world. And once we do our audits, everything comes back as failed. So it's really nice to be able to contribute and be part of that discussion, the initial discussion on accessibility standards, at least for my company. I've been in this field I've been in this accessibility field for about a year or so. I will be testing for my CPAC certification in the fall so I can be an official accessibility professional. And I'm super, super excited to be here. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
yeah, thank you. It just shows yeah, that accessibility is important in like all stages, like from designers to developers, stakeholders. Yeah, thank you. Um,
Absolutely.
shall I go to Africa now?
Hey everyone, I'm Africa. I'm over in Washington, D.C. An accessibility engineer. I work with the federal government as an accessibility consultant. So I pretty much help developers and the whole team test their products and give them kind of ideas and suggestions on how to fix their web applications, whether they be desktop or like a web application, to make them more accessible against WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I used to be an occupational therapist. I did that for about 8 years, working with people with disabilities, helping them with things like assistive technology, and working virtually with students and adults. In my free time, I like to kind of talk about accessibility because I'm obsessed. So I kind of stream on Twitch sometimes with Dorlyn, and we talk about how to make components accessible on Twitch and YouTube.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, we'll be talking about the study group in a bit. Okay. To start off, why should I make my website accessible? So an estimated 1.3 billion people, or 1 in 6 people, experience significant disability. They are the largest minority which anyone can join at any time. This is by the World Health Organization. 95% of homepages have WCAG 2 issues. There's some issues that are really simple to fix, which we'll cover later on. And there's also legislations, guidelines, which can lead to lawsuits. And also because of increased audience reach. Do you have anything to add?
Oh, I do. So
Yep.
I like the 1 in 6 people experience significant disability. And I think it's closer to like 1 in 5 people have a disability. And something that I hear a lot from developers is people with disabilities aren't using my app. That's not my target audience. And I like to always say, like, how do you know? How do you know who has a disability and who doesn't, and who's going to tell you that they do? So if you think about the fact that like 20% of humans have some sort of disability, you're leaving 20% of like some money that you could have been making on the table, and they will go where they can use the app in there, you know. So I just like to say that, sprinkle that in there.
Yeah, you know, I'll say that I am one of those people that acquired a disability later in life. I didn't specifically say it in my intro, although people may already know it about me or have guessed by the fact that I have a guide dog, but I am blind. I've been blind for 10 years, so I was sighted for the first 28 years, and it was a result of type 1 diabetes. Diabetes is very prevalent. There's a lot of people who are going to lose their sight from it, but there's just so many disabilities out there. But I'm one who definitely, I didn't think I was going to be blind, but ended up there and having access to, I didn't know people could use the internet, you know, as a blind person before I joined this community. I was very ignorant as well. So it's a kind of a matter of letting people know this info for sure. But finding out that we can use the internet and the web and the computers and all that stuff, as long as it's made accessible, it's so important, you know, get our money.
No, thank you. Let's see. Yep. So how can I make my website accessible? So I've put down a few notes, but we want to cover anything?
Oh, I saw someone put in the chat that Beyonce got sued for having a non-accessible site. And I just want to say I have roasted her website, and it is a beautiful thing to go back and see that it's a little bit better. But I saw that in the chat. I was like, yeah, she did get sued. And Target did, and a bunch of other people did too. So I mean, I don't want that to be the reason people start making their website accessible, because they don't want to get sued. But if that does it, then that's my little tidbit. Sorry.
It's okay. So easy ways you can make your website accessible can be looking at semantic HTML, so making sure you have your sections, your headers, your footers, and labeling going from H1, H2, H3 in order. And also quite an easy fix would be color contrast, which is 3:1 according to WCAG.
Yeah, I agree with that. The heading structure and the regions, they really set the organization of a page and allow us to, someone with assistive technology, especially a screen reader, to quickly understand a page. And those are just things that can be quickly put in and used well with just a simple understanding of them.
Yeah, especially since I've been reading up on screen readers and you have like shortcuts just to read like the headings, for example.
I love it. I can just quickly navigate a page by pressing one key and just get the general layout instead of having to read top to bottom or something. Saves a lot of time.
And I just wanted to add that as you make your site accessible, it's not a one and deal type of thing. You have to regularly test your website with screen reader and other assistive technology. Keep up to date with all the accessibility standards because they do change over time. Just stay in the loop and you should be pretty good to go.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Africa, do you have anything to add?
Sure. For like really quick tips on how to make your websites accessible, I guess the first part of it would just be like knowing kind of what to look for, even if you have to use like an automated tool at first to kind of test your websites, something that's easy to do, like downloading like a uh, an extension that'll show you. It's not going to show you everything. It's maybe going to show you like 40% of what's actually wrong. But I find in the beginning, when you're just learning, having something that just shows you what's there first, and then being able to change it and then retest and see those things go away are really nice. And some of the things that it'll show you are things like those heading structures. It'll also flag if you don't put alternative text on your images, which is like probably one of the first things that we all kind of learn as far as accessibility goes, but also no one does it. So it's worth mentioning, like, just, add alt text to images, not just because someone may not be able to see the screen, but also if you lose internet connection or if you have a slow internet connection or someone else is on your site far away. Sometimes all they will have is that alt text to tell them what that image is. Also, color contrast. Just download a color contrast picker right now. You can download contrast with an E at the end is one that I like to use. There's color contrast analyzer. Dorlyn can probably remember the name of the one that we use like officially, but there's, those little tools are good things to know as far as just quickly checking things. And we can put them in the chat as I remember a little bit more, but yeah.
And if I could add something here, Cathy, it's not definitely
Yeah,
necessarily website related, but in terms of quick accessibility fixes, we are all using social media a lot. Companies use social media a lot, get out different whatever it is, and a lot of that involves images. And so it's really important to put alt text on your images within social media as well. Maybe, well, I'm not going to say even more important than your website, but so much of content is dependent on those pictures. So making sure you get the alt text on those is a quick accessibility fix that's actually going to make someone with assistive technology, or at least a screen reader, pay attention to your post. And in terms of social media, second thing is making sure that you're camel casing your hashtags so that we're not getting gobbledygook. Because if it's all in like lowercase, my screen reader is going to try and interpret it as one long word. Whatever that needs to happen, it's hooked on phonics. It's going to try. But if you use camel casing and you capitalize the first letter of each word, it's going to be able to interpret those as actual words, and it's going to give me the actual phrase that you want someone to hear. So those are two quick fixes for social media posts that are just going to make it so much more usable for people with screen readers.
yeah, that's amazing. Thank you.
Oh, I have another one.
Yeah,
One, you should just do it. If just try to navigate through whatever you make with a keyboard only and don't use your mouse. You should be able to get through everything on your website and select it and get through it with a keyboard, and everything that you tab into that's selectable and does something should have a focus ring indicator around it so that people know where they are on your page if they are tabbing through. Because if I'm tabbing through and I don't get that focus indicator, I'm not going to know where I am on the page, and I'm just going to be kind of swimming around. And there's a lot more people than you think that don't use a mouse. And it's something you'll never think about. I know you've never probably thought about, like, the fact that if I only have one hand, or if I have weakness in my hand, or if I have arthritis, or any other bevy of things cognitively, if just tapping the space bar or the arrow keys are easier. There's a lot of reasons why. Also, power users of computers often only use the keyboard, and they're very proud of that. So another thing to consider.
yeah, that's just so true. Another thing that I also thought of was like testing your website at 200% zoom or 400% zoom and seeing whether you can navigate that or whether stuff like goes off the screen.
That's a really good one. Yes. Your website should not break if you do 200%. And really, you're supposed to do 400%. So just do it to 400%. And if it breaks, then you got to go back in and change, I guess, some breakpoints.
Yeah. Anything else to add, or shall we go into the next section? Okay. So how can a person get into accessibility? Do I need to take certifications?
I mean,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Evie. No, go
Uh,
ahead, Evie.
okay. Well, I'm not certified like Africa and Dorlyn are. But for me personally, I just got into it. I just started like the Nike what do you call mantra says, just do it. I mean, that's what I did. I just started, and eventually everything just started becoming more interesting, and I was super interested in knowing more, and I just ventured out into YouTube University, then DQ University, and just more information became available for me. And I've been building personal projects, and that was a excellent way for me to incorporate some of that stuff in, so that I would be able to start using assistive technology to be able to navigate through my personal websites and apps and whatnot. Um, and now that I feel a lot more confident about what I'm supposed to be putting in my projects, I now started. I started being part of a study group, so that I'm now able to partake those testing, so that I can start being a CPAC holder. But I'm sure that there is more to it. You don't necessarily have to be a CPAC or WAS certificate holder to start. Just start now, and eventually things will become more interesting for you to keep going.
I guess I'll go next then.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I definitely agree with Evie. Just do it. Jump in. I personally, so I lost my sight about 10 years ago, as I said, and so I started using assistive technology as a necessity. And then I was actually fortunate enough to be selected to take part in a course that was web development for people specifically with screen reader users. And in that, I got to learn HTML, a little CSS and JavaScript with kind of an accessibility perspective already. So I started there, but then a lot like EB, went to DQ University, and they offer free scholarships for anyone with a disability, which I just think is a fantastic thing that they do. It really takes down a barrier that's out there for some of us, especially I was on disability and didn't have the money to pay for any of these boot camps or courses or anything. So DQ is really a fantastic opportunity if you have any kind of disability. Then also I used free code camp and did their HTML course, learned a lot of it there. I really liked their setup and found it accessible. I wasn't able to do the project at the time due to them using another application that wasn't accessible at the time, but it's come a ways. And so there is things like free code camp to learn stuff about HTML as you go. But I don't think certifications are so necessary as being able to do the job. But I will say that the JAWS certificate is the one I got before I got a job. And I do think that it stood out on my resume because it showed that I knew how to use the assistive technology. That's something that is a free test that you can take through the Freedom Scientific website. You can study for it through there. You can take it there. So again, that's free, which is really great because so many of these certificates cost money. And so I really think that helped me a lot. And then I am also studying for the CPAC, even if you might think I may have taken it already since we did the study group, but I'm hoping to take that in July or August. And that'll be nice to take, although now that I have an employer who's going to pay for it, I find it a lot more feasible. But since getting the job, I did also do the DHS Trusted Tester, which is another free one. It requires some accessibility gymnastic moves if you are a screen reader user, and cited help at the end to be able to complete the practice test and the exam. But it is doable, and since it's free as well, I think that's a good one to take a look at if you're pursuing a career in accessibility and don't have the funds to take CPAC or WAS at this time. That's what I got.
Africa, did you want to say something?
Well, I didn't have any certifications for the first job that I got in web accessibility. Just want to make that clear, because it's possible. However, I do acknowledge that I do have a little bit of privilege in that I was in accessibility and I was an occupational therapist for a while, so I was familiar with the work. And I think certifications are nice to have, but at the time I quit my job, I learned kind of how to code first, and then I self-taught myself web accessibility from Google, the internet. I started the DHS Trusted Tester, which if you click on, I guess, one of the links that they may have about the DHS Trusted Tester, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's free. So I started there because I didn't want to pay $500 for the CPAC or the WAS, which are very expensive. I started there. I didn't have the DHS Trusted Tester when I got my job, but I did tell them that I was doing it. And I think that made a pretty big impact, especially because I didn't have any other credentials. But really what I did and what I think would be helpful for everyone who's really serious about accessibility to the point where they want a job in accessibility is do your homework, find your resources, find your community, and start studying like you're at school. Like put in an hour a week, an hour a day, whatever it takes, so that when you do get to that interview, you know everything front and back. You know, you've done the work to study, which you can do without all of these expensive certifications. However, it is time consuming and it does require a lot of executive functioning and trying to find where to find those resources, because there isn't just one size fit all. Here's a course, you take it and you can do it. You really have to put in some of that time to build something or test something, report on it. And there's, this is not long enough to go down that rabbit hole of like all the things that you need to do to get into accessibility without any experience or any credentials, right? But keeping that in mind, it's possible. It just takes a lot of extra effort and hard work. I would look into the DHS Trusted Tester and do that, because that teaches you how to test websites and how to do it in a standardized way. It's free. It's very time consuming though. That's one thing about it, which is why I didn't have it done while I was interviewing, but it was something that I mentioned in that employers liked. And then when you get your job, tell your job to pay for your CPAC and your WAS, which is what me and Dorlyn did. So that's how I got the CPAC. I got it because I was like, if you would like to hire me, I would also like some money for education. And it was a kind of part of the package at the time. So some things to think about. I think if you are a total newbie and you don't know anything about web accessibility and you really want a job and you get the CPAC and the DHS Trusted Tester, that will be helpful for you. But if you like just go hard and really start you know, doing the work to be able to get through a technical interview and say you know how to do it and you know what you're talking about because you know all the WCAG 2.2 standards, then you're probably going to be more ahead than the person who has, you know, just a bunch of certifications. So that's my little tidbit on that.
Can I add one more? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I have another different hack to suggest. If you're not if you are not a web developer yet, and or you do know somebody who is a web developer but still not in the field, y'all can collaborate the person can create website and you can go and audit, or at least get the practice of auditing the developer's work. That way you get the extra experience, and they also get the experience for working with an accessibility specialist, which you essentially are. And it's the best of both worlds. And also you're exercising your collaboration skills as well, which employers love to hear. And that's all.
That's awesome. And my other tidbit is for those assistive technology users out there. Embrace that assistive technology and learn it really well. It was definitely one of my strong points coming in for the job. And in this field, in accessibility, our disabilities really are a strength, and we should highlight those, and learning our assistive technology really well and being able to get around that proficiently is one of the best things I think you can do to really just start getting your foot in the door somewhere.
The other thing I wanted to add was you don't have to know how to code to do web accessibility. If you want to be like a tester or an auditor, you're full, like the reason you're being hired is not because you can code, but it's because you can look at something and tell the developer what they need to do to fix it. You don't necessarily have to tell them like what to code, right? You could just be like, this needs to be changed, and the web developer should be able to complete that task. However, if we're talking, we're talking about switching careers or like getting into web accessibility, if you know how to code, you are going to be above, you're going to be ahead of the game more than someone who doesn't, unless, the person like is that much better at web accessibility and testing and like knowing what needs to be fixed, right? So the paramount would definitely be like understanding those WCAG 2.2. Honestly, if you understand the WCAG 2.2, what I did was every day I tweeted like each standard. There's like 40 of them. I don't know. Don't quote me on the number, but like if you just memorize those and then understand how to look for them and to test for them, that is kind of the job. It's not the full job, but it's like the foundation of it is just understanding what those is and then expanding on that to be able to explain it to a developer. And if you're already a developer and you already know how to code, it becomes a little bit more easier to convey those things.
Thank you. So I think we're gonna wrap up the Africa, do you want to do a plug on this study group?
Oh yes, look at that. Yeah, we have I started the web accessibility study group because I was learning web accessibility on my own, but I was kind of like tweeting about it. And every so often I would do streams about it. But I got tired of learning about it by myself, and I was meeting other people who were interested in also studying together. So me and Dorlyn started streaming us studying for the CPAC, which is that web accessibility, not web, it's just regular accessibility certification. And then, yeah, I kind of went off from there. So if you want to come hang out with us, we do streams like every other week, kind of twice a month-ish, on different topics of web development and design. So you don't have to know how to code. If you know how to code, that's great. But designers, teachers, professors, web developers, software engineers, we're all kind of in it together. So we hang out and we learn about web accessibility together. And we also have a Slack group where we have a bunch of channels where you can kind of ask questions and plug your own web accessibility related projects. So if you want to join us, let us know.
And the next one is actually tomorrow, yeah, at 4 p.m. EST. Okay.
You are correct. And we have those up on YouTube too, so people can go and watch those. And our first season was all on the CPAC, the CPA, CC, what is that? The Certified Professional in Accessibility Core Competencies exam, because I don't think we've done our due diligence and said that acronym out yet. And so that's up there, and then they all go up a little bit afterwards, so you can keep up with us even if you can't join us live.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be moving on to the Q&A section now. So let me just scroll up and see all the questions. Okay, we have a question. Speaking of alt text, can you all showcase the difference between what you consider a decorative image versus an image that must have alt text? Who wants to take this one?
I will. I think it's a really hard one though. As I'm learning, if you mark something as decorative, our screen readers aren't going to be able to pick it up at all. So someone who might be curious about what little, kind of decorative images you might have on your screen won't be able to run that through, like I guess an OCR, I guess it wouldn't be an OCR, but won't be able to recognize there's something there to then maybe run through AI and have it described to them. But I think if it is somehow adding value to the page, for me, I pretty much want anything that's not like a little curly Q or something described. It is definitely an art though. And so I think taking the time to really think about it and what is the purpose of my page, what is the purpose of my images, and going from there. So if it's something that is just a little triangle you've put somewhere, definitely decorative for me, but a picture of two people standing there, I think I'd like to know that they're there, even if maybe they're not providing any if it's not super important. I don't know. It's a hard one though. I'll let Evie and Africa give their 2 cents though.
You're talking about decorative versus regular images.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna start by saying usually I defer to Dorlyn. Whatever Dorlyn says goes. If it's something assistive technology related, so I'd be like, whatever Dorlyn said. But if it's just me, the way I think about it is if it's adding no context to whatever's on the page, it's probably decorative. If without that image, something would be missing, that is definitely not a decorative image. But this is just me. And I think what Dorlyn is saying is a good example of this is just what I would expect, but I could also, it's kind of like one of those nuancy things. Some people want more things reported back to them with a screen reader, and some people want less. So I think Dorlyn has a really great saying, which is you meet one blind person, you met one blind person. And sometimes during our streams, you'll hear different ideas of what people want announced to them, and everyone's a little bit different. But if you go by the regular, like, is this important to the page, you'll probably have an answer. But if it's something like, even if it's not that important, it's kind of cool for the user to know and it's notably interesting, yeah, add the alt text and don't make it very long.
Yeah, I agree. My rule of thumb up until now, before I heard Dorlyn's awesome take, was does it add context to the page? And if not, most likely you don't need it. That fancy border with the flowery thing, swirly thing on it, does it add extra context to what you're trying to convey on the certain section? If not, move on. If not, I mean, or if it is, just write a little alt text, flowery, swirly thingy to make you feel better. I don't know. Yeah, so that's my take.
Yeah, thank you. Here's another question. I've been putting off the trusted tester because I am a Mac user and trying to figure out the best way to add Windows. Any advice?
I know that
But
you can, oh, go ahead, Africa.
no, you go. You might be more right. I'll sit back.
Well, I know that you can run a virtual Windows machine on Mac, but that you probably it might be hard to do if you just got like the 8 gig one. Sometimes they don't perform as well. So you could do that. It also depends if you're a screen reader user or not. If you're not, you're going to have an easier time with that than if you are. But go ahead, Africa.
Exactly what Dorlyn said. Yeah, you can run a virtual machine that spins up Windows if you want to learn how to do all of that. Darn, there has to be a better way, right? But it's kind of, you have to, yeah, you have to do that. Or go to the library or borrow someone's computer. But I'd probably just go to my local library or something like that, or to a friend's house who has one and be like, hey, I'm going to be here twice a week. I don't know. Yeah.
That's actually a really good point, though, that your local library, Africa, for anyone out there, if you're trying to learn a screen reader, most libraries will have at least one computer that have JAWS or at least another screen reader downloaded onto it, as well as other assistive technologies like Dragon, whatever. So your local library can be a really great place to try out assistive technology as well as use the Windows machine to do DHS or whatever you might need it for.
I didn't know that the trusted tester only requires like Windows. It doesn't sound too accessible.
It's got its problems. But no, I don't think you can do it from a Mac. I think you have to have Windows, and you need to use the Edge or the Chrome browser to download the Andy tool that they have you use. And then there's all sorts of issues once you get into the practical or the practice test and the final exam for those actually using assistive technologies.
Okay, next question. How can JavaScript and dynamic content be made accessible? Anyone want to take this?
Oh man, I mean, that's such a big question. Yeah. If it was a little more specific, we could probably answer a little bit better. But it's just like anything else where there's an answer. If you're talking about a hamburger menu, or you're talking about, really it's how you create things and whether or not if you're talking about JavaScript specifically, you're probably talking about something that's updating on the page before refreshing it, and just making sure that whatever is updating on the page is being announced in some way so that the user knows, or if something's updating and popping up a modal, that the focus of the screen, the cursor, if someone's using a screen reader or just the keyboard, that it goes to that pop-up modal and doesn't stay behind whatever it was on before. Those are like little things that you can use JavaScript for that often happen that are inaccessible. If something's auto updating on the page but it isn't being announced in some way, those are also some things. But it's such a broad question that I'm just kind of throwing anything at you that could possibly be caused by JavaScript. But yeah.
I think definitely using HTML where you can. I know that doesn't apply to that, but then with JavaScript, making sure that all your keyboard functionality is built in. But mostly what Africa said.
Yeah, it was quite a broad question. Next
Not only
one.
that, but a good point about that would be that most of your accessibility issues are going to be caught in regular CSS and HTML. Like that's where the most egregious problems come from, I would say. Probably just not using semantic HTML and doing something in there that's kind of weird that isn't announced properly, or makes the keyboard act funky. Because if you make a button and a link and a picture and a heading all those things will be announced immediately. Those main regions will be announced in some way and will behave as they are. Will be able to be navigated into And JavaScript is just like the extra stuff that you kind of layer on top that shouldn't affect that unless it's like something that's actively changing the page.
Yeah, I remember going to an accessibility talk, and they were saying how native elements are accessible by default, but then it's like when we try to make custom ones, then that's when it gets a bit, you know. Okay, next question. What are some accessibility issues of mobile websites and apps? So I guess maybe one would be like reflow, for example, when things are like off the page. Do you want to add anything?
Can you say the question again? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. What are some common accessibility issues of mobile websites and apps?
Color contrast and unable to scroll. That's something. There's overlays that interfere with a lot of that. At least that's been my experience so far.
Yeah. Some people only use their phone by voice. So things like dragging or selecting and having really small selection. If someone has low dexterity, they may need a wider tap area to select something. And sometimes they're like very minuscule and very specific so that you have to have really good hand-eye coordination to reach it. Dragging and dropping, there should be a different, there should be another way to do that if it's something that you're forcing the user to do. But in general, I would say mobile and desktop applications have the same exact rules, minus maybe like 3 or 4 things. It's like anything that has to do with kind of touching, the touch aspect of it and scrolling and things like that. So mostly gestures. So if you have like complicated gestures and no other way to complete that action in a more simplified way, that's problematic. What do you think, Dorlyn?
You know, one thing that I come across a lot is just things not being accessible with my assistive technology being turned on. Like there'll be a button that while I can flick to it on my iPhone, once I get to it and I double tap to activate it, it won't work. But if voiceover's turned off, you can touch that button. And so I don't know exactly the malfunction there, but that happens to me so much where there's a button that I cannot click on my own. Sometimes I'll try and figure out where it is physically, turn my assistive technology off, blindly, hit something on my screen and hope for the best. Sometimes it works. Sometimes I'll need to have a sighted person actually do something for me. So that happens more often than it should. And then also, honestly, form fields not being labeled properly, buttons not being labeled properly, where I can flick through a series of buttons that'll all pretty much read the same thing, and I can't tell which one's which prohibits me from doing whatever on my own. Most recently, I was trying to add hotspot minutes to my mother's phone, which is on my account. I've got several phones on my account, and each button was labeled manage my account, and I had to flip through everyone to try and figure it. So I think those labels on buttons and then also not being able to select certain ones are two of the major things I run into.
And I would also like to add that something basic as responsiveness is part of accessibility as well. So if you build a application or an app with a with desktop in mind, and you do want to convert that into a mobile application, make sure it's also viewable as a proper mobile application, because sometimes people forget to work on the responsiveness part. But with proper semantic, style and HTML and all that, it should address most of that.
Thank you. I think these two questions are quite related, so I'll say both of them. How is web accessibility expected to evolve with advancements in technology? What emerging trends should developers and designers be aware of regarding web accessibility?
That
Well,
darn AI, that darn AI, it's coming for us.
definitely AI. You took the words out of my mouth. Um, I think AI can be great. I mean, I think it can be a real tool when you're trying to describe an image and maybe you're not the creative type or the type to want to figure out how to convey that. You can quickly run it through AI and get your alt text there. I think we need to be aware of I'm going to say how many overlays are out there. You know, how many people are going to start promising that AI is going to be able to solve your accessibility issues, to fix your website and stuff. And I think you know, at the end of the day, manual testing is still what needs to be done. And the technology isn't there to do what we do as manual accessibility auditors. So anyway, Africa.
Well, they're talking about the future, and we know AI right now as it stands, there's nothing out there currently that will make your website accessible. If you just add something to your website with AI, it's just like it's a lie. Um, and it also, makes it worse for the user to use. But the reality is, if AI continues to evolve, there will probably be pretty good tools that will may be able to make that happen. So yeah, AI is one of those things where it's like, learn about what's currently out there, keep an eye on it, be able to use some of these tools and leverage them in certain ways. There are a lot of ways you can leverage things, but not a lot exists for accessibility at this point. So as far as technology goes, if you're talking about the future, and you're in the US, I don't remember, Department of something, put out a law that basically all websites need to be accessible. So something like just knowing what the laws are and how they're going to be impactful moving forward, and what you need to do to make your things accessible, so that you can help businesses and other people make their websites accessible. I think that's a really good thing to be thinking about right now. Just like, what do I actually need? What are the laws, and what do I need to do to be in compliance? And then how can I leverage the current, like, artificial intelligence that's here, and how can I keep an eye on it to make sure that I'm like up abreast on those technologies, and can either decide to use them or decide not to use them based on where they are, because I can only assume that it's coming. But I think more importantly would just be, know what your laws are, and be able to leverage that for your teams.
Yep.
Yeah, and just to note, there's the European Accessibility Act, which is going to come into force next year, 2025, and it requires all public service websites to be accessible. It's not just the countries within the European Union, but also the countries that also do trade the European Union too. Let's see. Well, this is an important question. How can developers test their sites for accessibility? And we mentioned a few things before, but it will be good to have like a concrete checklist.
Well,
I
go ahead.
I think we already put it in the chat, but I would, on like, where I started, just to get an understanding of what I was looking for, was using those extensions, and then just running them, and then 40 things would pop up, and then one by one I fixed them, and then I knew I had to go through it with my keyboard, and I tested with my keyboard. If I couldn't get to whatever it was with my keyboard, I went to my code and tried to figure it out what to do with it. So to me, that's how I would start. If you just have no other, if you just want a quick thing, just do that. That'll get rid of 50% of it. Run it through, your keyboard, that'll get another 20% of it. Obviously you should use a screen reader, but if I'm going to be like real, most people don't have access to a screen reader. It does take a little bit of time to learn one. And people aren't going to do it. So if they're not going to do it, I want you to get at least 80% of the way there. If you want to go the extra mile and you're really serious about this work, you need to figure out how to download NVDA or use VoiceOver if you have a Mac. NVDA is a free screen reader. JAWS is like $99 a year. So unless your job gives it to you, you probably won't have that. So that would be the extra, you're like superior tier. You really are a web accessibility tester / whatever, right? Once you get that screen reader in there and you know how to use it, you know how to navigate, you got your little checklist, you're good. But start with the extension. Just download it right now. Just go download it and mess around with it. Go on whatever your website is and see what pops up, and then change one thing, and it's going to feel so good.
Well, I will say that jump on the screen reader bandwagon, obviously. A little biased over here, but do some manual testing. You can do it. NVDA, non-visual desktop access, is free. It's open source. So you can just Google NVDA and you can download it. It works pretty similarly to JAWS. JAWS, while the license, if you want to pay for it and have the full version of it, it is $90 or $99 a year. There is a free version, so you can download and use the demo version where you can use it for 40 minutes. Then you'll need to restart your system if you need it again, but that's enough to at least run through your site a little bit. If you're using a Mac, you already have VoiceOver built into it, so Command plus F5 will toggle it on, and it starts with a little tutorial, so you can head through that. And then if you've got a Windows machine, you actually already have Narrator built in too. It's not nearly as robust as NVDA or JAWS, but Control Windows Enter will toggle that on or off. So if you need to turn it back off, same with the Mac, it's a toggle on and off. The Command F5 will make your computer stop talking to you. Don't panic. But Narrator also has a tutorial that starts off, so you've got that built in. So just give it a try. Don't be scared of screen readers, is my advice.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've got loads more questions, but we've only got time for that last one, so we'll start wrapping up. Yeah, thank you for turning up, everyone. I hope you learned something about accessibility today.